You're listening to Dead Air Podcast, part of splatterpictures.net.
What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knipe here with always
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 2024 soon-to-be certified classic, In a Violent Nature. Foley work, my footstep Foley work.
I watched this with subtitles the second time around, and at the beginning it says footsteps, and then later on it says footsteps continue, and I'm like, okay, this is it. This is what we're in for. Footsteps continue all day long.
The hypnotic nature of this film, I described it as ASMR horror. The filmmakers describe it as ambient horror, a nature documentary with horror. There's a lot of ways to describe this, but absolutely hypnotic, sucks you in, and very excited to talk about this. I'm very defensive, Lydia, as you well know, of horror movies that I like, and horror movies that are a special experience for me that I thoroughly enjoy. And this has all the hallmarks of that experience, that I could feel it. Going to the theater, I was one of two other people in the entire place, not really knowing what I was in for, only knowing that one, you had been really interested in seeing this film, and I had watched a trailer. I knew that it was from the killer's perspective, but I didn't really delve into what that could possibly mean, because when you look at the trailer, it just looks like a slasher. And I knew that the kills were very gory, but I saw it on that limited opening weekend, and man, was I thrilled. And even though you had recommended me this film, you hadn't seen it yet. And I really wanted to do it for the show, immediately wanted to do it for the show, because it was something that I could not wait to talk about. And I would have been heartbroken if you didn't like it too. And it would make me not want to do it, because it would just be a prickly conversation, because I like the movie too much. And I know that about myself. So I cannot wait to hear your experience, because I know you enjoyed the film as well.
After that setup, I still badly wish I could be a liar and an entertainer and say, yeah, well, get ready to rumble, Knipe, because I fucking hated it. But I can't do that, because I've already been online saying how much I loved it, and I loved it, and I've watched it twice, which I wouldn't do with a film I didn't love, and I went to see it in the theater, which I wouldn't do with a film I didn't have high hopes for. So like I'm really pleased to do this, even though we've been doing a lot of newer movies, and it is splatter pictures, and I'm always like to go into the oldie moldies and Wes's Kmart video collection. This is one we couldn't not do, because it is so close to us. Not on my end because of the theater experience whatsoever, or the idea of ambient or ASMR horror, because honestly, if someone's going into this expecting ASMR horror, they're going to have a bad time once you get car horns, generators, wood splitters, noise. You get like some very loud, intense scenes. No, like, sorry if that's a spoiler to somebody who thinks it is just simply a wonderfully wrought zombie slasher man trudging through the forest, which a lot of it is. And it is very, if you want to be in the relaxing green, and let me tell you, after a long week at work, it is so nice to slip into this horror movie and relax in the forest, even with the horrific scenes, because we're horror fans and that is soothing to us to a certain degree. So, yeah, I really like everything about this movie that way, but it feels like coming home. That's the biggest part of it for me. It's like going into my father's backyard. It's like taking that little trail down to the cold creek that is spring fed outside the cottage. It is going hunting or camping or fishing or whatever it is that you do out in the forests of Northern Ontario, and finding that little dead road that no one goes down except maybe twice a year to make sure that no one died on it. Some sort of logging road or something like that. Those sorts of trails and cottages that are very well preserved and very little visited by people. That's what this whole movie feels like to me, is just hanging out in that sort of space. And I really, really dig the way they captured it.
The lead up to this film, you had mentioned it a couple of times. So when Liz and I are discussing what movies that we should do to get our show in order, there was a couple of times where you had said you had wished that we could do In a Violent Nature, even though the film hadn't come out yet. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what was it about hearing about this film, early trailers? What was it about it that seemed to capture your imagination? At the very least, being very interested. Maybe it seemed to me one of your most anticipated films of the year.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it's entirely the trailer. And even though the trailers didn't really set us up exactly for what we were getting, they did a good job. Sure, they weren't lying, but they looked a little grindhousey. And you would think that maybe these images that we're seeing of this nice, quiet forest scene where nothing's really happening, or a lake, and then suddenly a body bobs up from nowhere, a guy trudging through the forest from his back, and it looks like almost like a video game, like you're following behind Jason in the Friday the 13th video game. That's all I needed. Whether it was a grindhouse action-packed splatterfest, or it was the quiet, ambient horror movie that we got, I was fine with either of those, because it included a body bobbing up from a lake with no real pretense before or after, and gorgeous woodland forest scenes with a giant Jason Voorhees looking dude trudging through the forest. That's all I needed.
And I just needed your interest, because between you and my partner Cassandra, who made a point of going to go see this movie when they were traveling in New York, I felt really compelled to see this film, which I was interested in at the time. But I don't think that if those two factors, if two of the most important people in my life weren't also interested in seeing this film, I probably would have skipped it and then regretted it later, and then waited for it to come out on digital. But I'm so glad that I got that theater experience, because of the unique nature of this film. I feel like I'm going to be saying the word nature a lot this episode. But the unique...
Yeah, me too.
The unique nature of this film doesn't need to be seen in a theater to enjoy it, but damned if I didn't love that experience of just the full screen. Now, it's not a full screen movie. You're going to see the bars on the side. I don't... It's like...
Yeah, it's a 4:3
ratio, which initially when it turned on, I was like, oh yeah, we are in independent country here. The film was distributed by IFC, and we've done an IFC film already this year with Late Night with the Devil, and you know they had a lot of success lately with horror, with uh, Evil Lurks and Skinamarink last year, and like horror films that people are talking about. Stop Motion came out earlier this year, so things that are you know that you could check out on Shudder and shit like that. Although weirdly, we had to rent this on Amazon Prime to watch it again, even though Amazon Prime, you go there and the first thing you see is Shudder, and I was like, well, I'm not watching this on Shudder.
Yeah, which is odd to me. I thought it would be out quicker, but I guess it's done very well. So might as well rent it before it comes to free streaming, because it eventually will come to Shudder. So if you're not interested in buying it for $25 digitally, or you're waiting for it to come out physically and would check it out if it were free, I'm sure it will come to Shudder, because it is just so perfect. Yeah, that 4:3 or 1.3 to 1 ratio is jarring to some people. I get it. If you don't like the little black bars on the sides, or you don't like a black bar on the top and bottom, which used to be the complaint, or you don't like subtitles, not that this needs subtitles by any means, but if you're that person that just wants a more direct fed video experience or film experience, you may not like it so much. If you need film like 17 beat storylines that fall where you expect them, then this might not be for you, because it is a slower film. You know, it has no score. There's nothing to excite you like that. There's nothing to tell you what's coming. There's nothing to tell you, you know, to there's nothing but you to keep notes. There's nothing to spoon feed you the story of this guy. You're going to have to remember what people say, and you can hardly hear it when they do, because a lot of it is off camera. Like most of our people we deal with in this film are hard to get to know because they're mostly off camera. It's filmed on a Canon C70 in the backwoods of Northern Ontario and part of Southern Ontario, because it's filmed a little bit in Peterborough and a little bit up by Sault Ste. Marie. We've already been up to this sort of backcountry area where the black flies are super fucking thick with the, what is it, the Canadian Deliverance?
Rituals, that's right.
Rituals. That was like filmed in a very similar location. But of course, we have this modern filmmaking tactic of very crisp, clear, long shot photography on video, straight to video. Like, this is not a film camera film, even though it has that real feel with that smaller ratio, no score, long scenes. Like, it's very well color balanced to get that lush dark green, and it has a low contrast so that we can see everything in the darker forest. Like, it's an experience. I didn't have the best experience in the theater though, because we were surrounded by people that kept eating. I was so jealous that you were in a theater with two people because that's nice and quiet. And I'm sure they were probably film goers, and since there's few people in there, they probably weren't enticed to make a bunch of fucking noise, but the people around us were noisy bastards.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. No, the people who watched the movie with me were a younger couple, and they didn't make a sound. I wouldn't even have known they were there. The other thing that I didn't know was what was lacking until I read your social media post where you talked about the lack of a score, and I sat back in my seat and I said, I didn't even fucking notice that there wasn't a score. That's how enthralled with this movie I was. I was just so paying attention to the sounds of nature, the sounds of Johnny's footsteps, every squelching gush of the kills. I didn't notice for a fucking second that there wasn't a score. You know, and unless you're going to count Aaron's dying Walkman, which I suppose you could, but you know, fuck all that, Lydia. You know, what is this movie even about? about anyways? I want to know.
This movie is about how I was walking round and round the cabin, and they think I'm slow, eh? Because I'm Canadian. Yeah. It's about being slow and Canadian, eh? When you just need to kill and keep on killing and you don't know why, but you just keep on going because everyone thinks you're slow, eh?
Oh, geez, you kids look, you kids look scared there. Let me help you out there. Let old Johnny help you out there.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Oh, gee whiz.
Unreal.
Oh,
Yeah, it's about, you know, don't judge a book by its cover and underestimate the slow kid, right? Maybe that's what the story's really about. Anyway,
or don't fuck with them anyways. You know, I watched this film with my partner Cassandra, and you're never going to find a person more sympathetic to your giant silent slashers than them. You know, they have a great deal of love and sympathy for Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers and all of them. And they pointed out, which I because there's certain sequences in which Johnny demonstrates very clever like tactics in order to do the things that he is doing. And Cassandra pointed out, was he slow or did he just have some kind of deformity where people said he was slow? Was he slow or was he being judged purely on his appearance? The same way that Jason Voorhees, oh, he was slow. Was he slow or did he just look not like everybody else? And so people called him that word. I think there's this other word for it. What do you call that word?
don't get canceled now, Wes.
So such thing as cancel culture, Lydia. So I will not listen to your toxic masculinity. Aurora's a peach. I love her.
Yeah, she really truly is. I love how she dies. I'm coming with my big dick energy here, but my people in my family are very thoughtful, kind of slow talkers. People in my best friend Kelly's family, some of them are very deep thinkers, slow talkers. I also think he could look completely normal and be a very deep thinking, slow talker. And if someone asks you a question and you stop and stare at them because you're thinking, not just this day and age, but for the past like 30 years, 40, 50 years, if you're not like quick on the draw with that transcontinental jive talking quickness of New York City, people are going to think that you're out to lunch or slow. So he could have been
very famously, while filming the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they used an actor at the gas station who has a very striking appearance, let's say. And he's a little slack-jawed and he looks like he might be a little slow. And he's playing a character that you would think would be not present mentally, just sort of lazily squeegeeing the front of the van. Smart as a whip. That's what everyone said about that. That was one of the smartest people that they ever met in their entire life. He just happened to look like he wasn't. So, you know, it goes to show you that you really can't judge a book by its cover, and particularly how certain people are used in horror. But the opening of this sequence, if you were not entirely sure what the perspective of the killer might imply, I certainly was not entirely sure how they were going to execute this. I purposefully go into a lot of movies not really knowing a whole lot. I'm not one of those people that's going to freak out, have a meltdown if I get spoiled on something. But I also don't seek out. I know that certain people seek out information. They don't like to not know what's going to happen. The opening sequence where we are hearing a collection of gentle dudes talking around a shack so dilapidated that it makes Jason Voorhees' shack look like a luxury suite. It's all off camera. We don't ever see them. We are fixated on this pole with a necklace on it. And then we will see, who we will learn will be Troy, take that necklace off of the pole while the characters that we don't see vacate the scene. And then here we are with a little wriggle and a squelch, and we are introduced to the protagonist of this film, Johnny. This sequence really sets the tone well for how you are going to have to pay attention to characters that you're not necessarily going to see, and you are going to have to rely on your knowledge of the slasher subgenre to craft the story in your mind about what we as the audience members are missing and what the character of Johnny doesn't care about, because this is a man on a mission.
One thing I thought about halfway through watching this the second time is that this would be a fitting movie for those who have no hearing capability. Like, subtitles aside, they do sort of help if you're interested in the story, but you could turn those off and enjoy the hell out of this movie if you know the slasher subgenre, because we see a still shot basically of a necklace in the forest, and someone eventually just grabs it and takes it, and then a thing rises from the ground. It's so classic horror movie monster. Someone has gone somewhere they weren't invited, taken something that did not belong to them, that was of great importance, to the point that it raises the dead. Like, you don't even need to hear what they're talking about, but what they're talking about is super cool, because it's talking about a massacre that happened. And it sets us up for our campfire scene later on, where we get a little more of this story. And it's not all like spoon-fed to us either, really, which is nice. We get bits and pieces of this story throughout the story, and we can fill some things in on our own. But yeah, you'll have to like pay attention to these off-screen conversations that are very quiet. If it was a crowded, busy place, or if you had like young ones eating pizza in the room while you're trying to watch this movie, I think it might ruin it.
There was something to be said about some of the initial reactions to some people. I had heard felt like if they hadn't seen this in the theater, they would feel very compelled to look at their phone, to look off in other directions, to not really pay attention because of this habit that, and I'm not going to this is not a Gen Z thing. This is just living in the modern world thing. We have all got a certain degree of fucking brain rot because of just the world that we live in. And this movie being hard to pay attention to because it's not something that has a lot of action and a lot of things, bells and whistles to keep your attention going, while simultaneously, if it can't really be a film that you have on in the background, to your point about children noisily eating pizza, you're really not going to get the full effect unless you put your phone down for 90 minutes and just fucking watch the movie, which is, again, like, I'm not going to say like, who can't do that? I look at my phone while I watch movies. Like, I'm not fucking above this. I'm just saying that I think a lot of people felt lost or felt that the film wasn't working for them because it couldn't demand their attention, or their attention just gets derailed so easily because you have a movie on, you're looking at your phone, people are talking, like you have a million different things stimulating your brain at once, and this film makes zeroing in on it fucking mandatory.
It's very true. I do have my phone nearby sometimes when watching a movie, but it's not that I've trained myself to watch a movie with my phone in my hand, which, if we're talking generationally, it does skew younger. It definitely does. The bitching and moaning about people that do that, though, skews older. So, yeah, I get that, and you're right. It's not a generational thing. It's this day and age, and people still, unfortunately, have their phones and watches active during a fucking theater film, like it's no big deal. There's been a lot of complaints about people going to see a Quiet Place 2, where people are continuously being noisy because people have been like, it's suggested to watch it very quietly, so people are being extra noisy going into there, and they're like using their phones and their watches while they're watching the film and annoying people. So whatever that trend is, I'm glad it didn't infect our experiences in the theater watching this particular film, because it sort of relies on that, I think.
When we learn brief snippets of the, what do they call it, the White Pine Massacre, and we get our campfire story, this is where I knew initially that I was going to thoroughly enjoy this. And I'll talk more about my gripe with modern slashers when we get to our campfire scene, because I think that's critical to the point that I'm trying to make. But before we get to that campfire sequence, we are first going to be introduced to a lot of traps, a lot of bear traps in the woods. We're going to see a rotten fox or a dog or whatever, coyote. And we are going to be introduced to our first set of characters. One, a forest ranger who is there's something so obnoxious about some of the people in this film that it kind of reminded me of, there's an indie game franchise called Party Hard, in which you are a slasher who has like an annoying neighbors having a loud party, and it's a stealth kill game, and the object of the game is to kill as many people in the party without being noticed as you possibly can. And I honestly feel like when it comes to Johnny, they try to let you know, oh, don't worry, these people are super obnoxious. You don't have to like them or find them interesting. Even our ranger is going to just be hammering that horn, talking to this man who is trapping illegally into the forest. And they're going to have this conversation. And the audio in this is so great because, again, it's teaching you how to watch the movie with some very basic scenes in which you have to really listen to the fucking dialogue. In the theater, it was easy. On the film, at the home viewing, I had on subtitles as well. So it makes sure that you can like hear every bit, because you're going to be hearing it at a distance, and you're going to hear this argument between these two men. And you are going to get our first set of looking at a scene, how it's art directed, and trying to get as much character out of the scene. This angry trapper man, who honestly comes off as quite rational, even though he is doing something illegal, he's the rational one in the conversation in my estimation. But you go to this place, and it's this dilapidated, sad looking farmhouse, like houses you see all over the place in Ontario. And you can see that at one point this was probably a well-kept, beautiful place. Now it's riddled with beer cans, a child's little race car. But then when you get inside and you see this photograph and you see this motherfucker thing hanging there, and then we get a little bit of Johnny's backstory of what this pendant that he's looking for means. It's a gift to remind him of his mother. And he is looking at this thing, trying to see if this is the same item, but he's distracted because this angry man carrying a shotgun tries to shoot him. And it's hard to say if you would call this impervious to bullets, but he certainly can take a buckshot.
He's also extremely intelligent or just really lucky, and that sort of persists through the film. Even our victims are either really intelligent or super lucky, and all of our victims are good or bad, same as Johnny. He has some good side and some bad side. We can project on him as well a lot of the time. Does he go toward Chuck, the number one motherfucker's house, because he found a dead dog, and he's like, oh, trapping's bad? Okay. So did he do that because this guy's mean to animals? Or did he have some spidey sense that there was a necklace in that house? Like, you know, which kind of Johnny do you prefer? Do you prefer a Johnny that is a slasher zombie with a heart of gold that wants to stop the illegal trapping in the park, or do you want the driven, cold, calculated, does not give a shit about anything, looking for his necklace kind of guy?
The ranger indicates that when Chuck, the number one motherfucker, has moved there fairly recently, for the ranger is a young guy. I had wondered, is that Johnny's home that this person moved into? It's not far from the firehouse. He seems familiar to the woods, and could poking the dog or the coyote or whatever it is, the corpse, is he angry at the trapping? Or is it more of a look of, well, this isn't something that, these traps and all this wasn't here before. And then he's going into this place. Is that why his father's, we assume's, reflection shows up in that mirror? How long has he lived there? This house looks pretty old and dilapidated. It's possible. It definitely looks over 100 years old. It's possible. Or it could just be his amulet sense, or his disdain for trapping animals. Things that enrage him. General unfairness. This first kill is very deceptive. And so is the second one, honestly. Because I came to this, the opening weekend, the first things I was hearing was how violent this film was. It's called In a Violent Nature. And so...
yeah, there were walkouts of theaters. I mean, we had 2 walkouts in our viewing.
So when this first kill could have been in a PG-13 movie, it's all implied. I liked it, but I thought to myself, for our first kill, the general rule of horror is kick them in the balls. Let them know what level of violence that you are going to be in for when you see this film. It gives everyone a chance to get out of the theater and get their money back if they want to. It doesn't happen in this sequence, and it almost looks as though it was edited, like censored and edited. It doesn't ruin anything, but it really, really is deceptive to what you're in store for. He returns to this place after killing Chuck, his hand now covered in gore. We're not quite sure. I mean, I'm assuming he just like reached in and crushed the dude's head or something like that. But it's not, this is not his family. This is not his mother's pendant. He is off on his own, and he is going to head back out into the woods, not affected by the time of day. He doesn't ever seem to get tired. And we instantaneously get a truck full of youths who for me, it's the extended, uninterrupted hooting and hollering the entire length of the car passing by Johnny, where I was like, it's music. That's one thing. But are you trying to tell me that everyone in the car is just, the entire time?
I remember being out in a very, very quiet, wonderful place, Pine Lake, and we're on this island in Pine Lake that is quiet, so quiet. You could hear a loon 3 lakes away. You could hear a moose swimming across the lake if you, like, from miles away, it seems. You hear nothing. But one night, a campground of woohooers showed up, and they were woohooing, and all of them were woohooing continuously. And one of the young teen daughters of the people I was camping with woohooed back, and I just instantly, Crystal, never, ever, woohoo a woohooer. And I don't know where it came from. That motherly bitchiness came out of me. And she laughed her ass off because she's like, woohoo a woohooer. And I'm like, you never, ever woohoo a woohooer. You don't know what kind of people you're dealing with out here.
You sound like a soothsayer character from a slasher movie where you're like, you don't have a woohoo, a woohooer. Don't know what kinds of folks are going to be out here. By IFC.
Yeah, and those were classic woohooers. I wouldn't want anything to do with them, whether they be, kids on spring break or, deliverance level hillbillies out to get you. I don't want a woohoo or woohooer. But I've heard woohooers out in the wild. I've heard them. And they do all woohoo, and they woohoo back at one another, whether they're drunk or sober. And I don't really get it, because I myself am not a woohooer, had you not guessed.
I had guessed. I am unable to separate any films like this without thinking of my beloved cottage up there in Quebec, and boy, to sound travel in that area.
Yes.
And especially when you're on the water. And there are so many instances in my life, even the last time we were up there, such noisy people. It was Canada Day weekend. So, there's a lot of energy and a lot of music coming from all directions and kids playing. And you can feel as though you really get a sense of what everyone is saying and doing. It's crazy how sound travels.
Yeah.
And how insulated we are
Yes.
in a city from everything that's going on around us. But I'm getting people's fucking backstories when I am out on the lake. And I love it personally because I'm a fucking snoop and I love to know all that kind of stuff. But this is a classic case of woohooers, but it's not even woohooers, because hooering makes it seem like the yelling stops at some point. These are just wooers. They're like, woo, just like continuous. We're getting in the weeds with these kids, but it does attract Johnny. And I don't think it attracts them as anything more than maybe in his slumber, his stasis, he heard those voices before, and maybe he is drawn to them, or maybe like a moth to the flame, it is just noise and movement. And an animal didn't take the amulet or the pendant, so maybe they did. It's a long shot, but he makes his way to the cabin, and we are first introduced to our cast of characters right and proper in a good old-fashioned campfire scene.
It's nice. It's a nice way to meet them. And I can see why he would be drawn by sound, if that's the only thing. He's drawn by the sound of the horn honking. He's drawn by the sound of the car. He's drawn by the sound of people in his forest, because there's typically not, from what we gather. So, yeah, a campfire story that is quite typical, with a bunch of teens, a bit of drinking, a little bit of back and forth and sass because one of them was banging another one or something. We get some sort of air of that sort of animosity between two of them, really close friends between others. We got a slightly vaguely nerdy one or geeky one. That guy that is going to be the curly-haired, Shelly kind of nerd person, but not dialed up to 11. We get a semi-jock looking type character that seems to be more interested in staying a little more clean cut than the rest, a little bit preppy, but again, subtle, only dialed up to 11. We get the very prim, proper, politically correct type of person who's going to call other people out on their bullshit, but dialed down. Everyone's kind of believable. Not likable, but they're all kind of believable.
I agree. Some of the criticisms of this film are about the dialogue of these characters. I've heard that, oh, this dialogue is so bad. And I just keep thinking, compared to what? What are you holding up on a pedestal in terms of slasher dialogue? That isn't to say that, well, all slasher dialogue is bad, therefore you shouldn't care if this is bad. That's horseshit. Slasher movies have incredible writing in them at sometimes not so much, but usually, there's some really powerful scenes that can exist within these films. Friday the 13th is littered with them. I'll never not get chills at Marcy's speech of the dreams and the rain turning to blood. It's a beautiful monologue, but there's also some hokey ass shit. But I think that these characters reflect young people of the moment. You have everyone in here that sounds as though they could be existing. The way they tease each other, the way that they hoot and they holler, there's a lot of coded language. And again, we need to determine what every character's relationship is in a very short amount of time, because the point of this scene is not really to introduce ourselves to these characters beyond what tropes they probably represent. And then we're going to need to keep that in our mind, because as their story unfolds throughout the film, we are not going to be present for it. And that is extremely important distinction when dealing with this film, because this is from Johnny's perspective, and he's on a one track mind. And so he's not really interested in what the interpersonal relationships are, but he does get to do something that I always love, hearing people talk about you, because Aaron is going to tell a campfire story, and he is going to tell a story of a quote unquote slow kid who father was a firefighter, was a single dad because their mother passed away, and he was playing with toys, and his dad was like a local merchant, but like it
was the company store.
That's right. The loggers. And so they bring him to, he's playing with toys. One of them trips, gets hurt. And so they want to teach him a lesson. And so they put on one of those old fireman hats or masks. And they are going to like lure him to this firehouse, scare him. He falls, he breaks his neck. His father confronts them later because they try to cover it up and deny it. A fight breaks out. The father is killed. People go to check on this land, the people who own the logging company, and everyone's been dead, ripped to shreds. It is the White Pine Massacre, and that's our campfire story. It's very simple. It's very clean. It's very serious.
Yeah, and sort of like The Burning, where it starts out with a prank gone wrong. We can sort of relate to that. If I'm not a pranker person, I hate pranks, and I can relate to that from the point of view of, well, if someone pulled a prank on me, I'd tear the whole town to shreds too. Or if you're a pranker, being like, oh, that's like the worst case scenario. I'm so glad that didn't scare whoever I've pranked in the past to that degree that it resulted in death.
They say that every few decades or so, the killings start again. And we know that that's probably likely in the case of Johnny. But we're going to get a little bit of background later on, a little bit more, but it's not going to be so much more explaining the character's motivations, because the character's motivations, Johnny's motivations, should be self-explanatory. This is good old-fashioned revenge, and he has come back as an undying revenant who just like wants to get revenge against the people, and everyone is the people who wronged him and his family and were responsible for his state. And I really, at this point in the film, you are getting something that so many people get wrong, Lydia, and I don't know why they get it so fucking wrong all the time. And I think this is how come, at least in the early part of the trilogy, the Halloween 2018 trilogy was so successful initially until it went off the rails in the final film, to me anyway. And why I love this film so much is because it's treated so fucking seriously. the rash of slashers that have come out, whether it be like It's a Wonderful Knife or Final Girls or like Totally Killer or Happy Death Day, everyone who wants to create slashers does not, cannot, or will not try to treat them seriously. They're always looking for, where's the fun? These are supposed to be fun, goofy time. Yeah, they sure can be. And there's a lot of goofy slashers from the heyday of slashers. There was even more that were just treated seriously, that didn't try to over-explain things. Every time that I hear about people crying about all of these failed Friday the 13th revamps, all of these failed series that they tried to get going, they always like, and we're going to learn, like, takes place in Jason's childhood. Why do you want to do this all the time? What is the fucking compulsion to try to over explain these things? You're trying to take a big fat shiny bauble and you're trying to put it on a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. It cannot hold it. It should not hold it. It doesn't need it. It's simple. This is pared down, simple, and serious. And if you want to ask me what everyone gets wrong with modern slashers, there are exceptions. Some of the ones in the last decade or so that I've really liked, like Chrome Skull and Hatchet, have treated their material fairly seriously. And it's just that they didn't try to make it a parody because they didn't know how to make it any other way. They didn't know how to wink at the camera and be like, huh? Just like a slasher movie, right, guys? Wink, wink. I even exclude the modern day Scream films because that's just like a insular thing now where they're not even talking about slasher movies anymore. They're literally just talking about their own movies at this point.
Yeah. Scream is absolutely about Scream, but even some of the remakes that have taken, well, not remakes, but like inspo from Friday the 13th, the like Never Hike Alone, take it extremely seriously, and those are absolutely drop dead enjoyable. And even when they do subvert the expectation of a slasher film, because I think that's the filmmaker's dilemma, is like, well, if I just do a paint by numbers slasher film, it's going to be like another slasher film. Where you take something like this, where kill off our favorite characters first. How about that? Aaron told us this story. We like Aaron. A lot of us can relate to Aaron because we're like, he's kind of the geek. He's kind of the outcast among his friends. And as horror fans, a lot of us fill that role or did in high school and things like that. He is he's the guy we know the best. He's the guy the camera's been on the longest at this point. And he is not long for this world. And that is breaking a rule that is delicious. It's a delicious rule to break in a slasher film that is taking itself seriously. It's no fun in a way if you're doing it the psycho method of having your little red herring kill at the beginning of a film with your favorite character, quote unquote, or whatever. Like, that's different because that's telegraphed and a very different tactic than having us get to know a character for real in an established setting of a slasher film. And then they just kill him off quite brutally too, and then use his body as a tool. But, well, really, like, it's wild what they do here. If this was being played for laughs, this is where our trust in this film would be broken.
Exactly, because Aaron is a great example of did that just happen character trope, where it's somebody who would be like, never read the Latin. He's that character, right? Like, that's the character that he's supposed to be, the person who has all of that insider information that lets us as the audience know that the characters are going to find out. But we're not spending any time with these characters outside of what Johnny observes. He stalks the house. He gets an eyeful of everyone that's there. He's trying to determine who has his pendant, and he can't quite get a finger on it. But once Aaron leaves the safety of the group and he goes off to, they think he's going off to like go meet up with those gas station girls, and then it immediately evokes every gas station scene that we have ever seen in every slasher, where they would have had a brief moment to get to know these characters before they even arrived at the facility, at the cabin.
The facility, the thing that facilitates her death. And we, spoiler alert, never ever meet the gas
We
station
don't.
girls.
Although that'd be wild. They'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go walk 4 hours up the road to go meet these girls. It's already the middle of the night. What makes you think they're there anymore? So you're going to like 8-hour round trip. That's wild. Anyway, that's neither here or there, because the top of his fucking head is going to get sawed off. And this kill is great. And this is where here I am sitting. When somebody tells me something's gory, Lids, I am expecting some of the more modern Evil Deads. I'm expecting headless. I'm expecting like there I was sitting with my arms crossed, like, I think you said it was going to be gory. I think you said it was going to be gory. And so we get to Aaron's death, and I had this reaction where I was like, yeah, it's pretty gory, I guess. Where
You sound like me watching The Sadness, you know? The Sadness was wall to wall, almost Sushi Typhoon levels of gore. And there's only a few scenes where I was like, yeah, that's real. That's absolutely the most gory thing I've seen of late. For the most part, I'm just like, meh.
it's like, come on, In a Violent Nature. I'm sitting here in the theater and I need to feel something, and I need to feel.
Where are these walkouts, right? Like, did you have, like, no, this is not walkout inducing here. It's interesting and it's fun. That's, if it's a different kind of fun than Scream films or joke films or The Babysitter or all those other not very scary movies are. Those joke slasher movies, I don't know what you call them. They're just sort of a parody of a slasher film for fun. And sure, they're fun if you like that sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of, I don't know, meme, making a meme out of a horror film. If you like that, this could go that way, but it's pretty serious, and especially because he grabs the body in the head and goes on a walk.
These walking sequences in this film, gang, I really have to take a minute and dial in on them, because they are so compelling. And if somebody says boring, I don't get it. I don't understand what you don't find interesting about this. This moment when he is dragging Aaron's body, the top of his head in one hand, we don't know where he's going, by the way. We don't even understand. Why are you leaving everyone else? Why did you kill this guy? Was it just because he crossed your threshold? Probably. But where are you going, young man? And while this is happening, Aaron had a Walkman on him for aesthetics. He's a bit of a hipster. And during the struggle, it got damaged, or maybe the batteries are dying. And so the generic sort of rock music, whatever he was listening to, slow it down. And as he's walking, you hear this slowly dying music, and it is so well executed. And there's your score. I don't know what the fuck anyone's talking about, but at least in this sequence. And then you have what I would consider the most straight up comedic thing in this entire movie, is when he pitches the top of Aaron's head into that ranger station, because it is so utilitarian. It is so, to a guy that can take buckshot to the chest, why you need to, it had this air of like, I'm not breaking this glass. What if I get glass in my fingers? I'm going to pitch this guy's head through, and that's going to do it. It was so fucking funny to me, just how much disregard he had for this guy's body. And then we get a little bit of atmosphere, Lids. We are in this ranger station. He looks at a picture of people that we don't recognize, because remember, we haven't seen that one of these characters full on before. We've heard him, but we haven't seen him. And then we get a look at our artifacts, our wall. This is just like any other like small area. You got a little bit of utility. It's a ranger station, a little bit of history. We got our old fire masks. We got our drag hooks. We got our old hand axes. It's great.
There's one thing about this scene leading up to it that reminded me of being a young person in Canada was the dying batteries because batteries in Walkmans die in the cold. You don't even have to have old batteries. They start to slow down when it gets very, very cold. So if you're outside, like a little post-punk fucking teenager wearing your barely there jacket and your little Doc Martens and you're listening to your Walkman, the batteries are going to die in the cold. And it's kind of funny. So you probably experience that sound more often than not. And if you're a Canadian of any sort, you've also experienced like the Roadside Community History Museum, which is what this ranger station sort of is. Or you go into, and it's a different feeling when you're watching older slasher films that are set in the south of the US on Route 66 and you get these roadside oddities. You get sort of like gentle oddities here in Canada in these little community museums. They may have a hair wreath that belonged to the wife of the mayor. Most of them, though, and this is how it ties in so beautifully, and I think that this is really a much more modern take on that utilitarian, the founding fathers of Canada, where My Bloody Valentine talks about the miners, and we have a rich mining history here in Canada. We have a very rich logging history, especially in Ontario, and you can't get into a small community without there being some remnant of the logging industry in their little community museums and ranger stations and snack shacks and, gift stores. You go into gift stores and you're going to see a piece of wood that is stamped with a diamond that says JR or JRB or Booth, JR Booth Lumber. E.B. Eddy is the big logger that was around this area, but for most of Northern Ontario where this was filmed, it was J.R. Booth. And in any of those community museums, you're going to see shit from the logging industry. You're going to see those big hooks that they use to drag logs through whatever chute system or down the rivers. You're going to see photos of the whatever river's closest full of fucking logs. You're going to see that big log cut to show how old and how big these trees were when they were felling them back in the day, with that branding on them of J.R. Booth, E.B. Eddy, and there's a few other large ones, but those are the two largest. And it's nice to me in a way that they didn't pinpoint one particular logging company and like blame them, because they were all pretty good as far as like large scale magnates of the time and the richest men in the entire continent at the time. Probably they were actually pretty okay dudes. There's not huge scandals, so it would be kind of unfair to like blame this on the J.R. Booth Company store of the area, but it felt to me just so homey and so rural to have this like little education corner in the thing that talks about the history of the logging of the area.
Yeah, you would usually find them in like visitor centers or sort of like information desk, town halls, anything that would have like flyers. Like if you go to like Merrickville or if you go to any of these small areas in Ontario, they're all over the place. And it's such a rich, interesting little bit of history in every town. And I really dug that about this. It also brings us to what would be our final silhouette of our slasher, Johnny. He gets himself his own iconic mask. He gets himself his own iconic weapons. He gears the fuck up. And the mask has this eerie quality because it is a solid piece from head to shoulders, not unlike the giant owl mask in Stage Fright, where it's just this big oversized thing. He looks like a fly to me when you look at him straight on. And particularly in the sort of infamous yoga sequence that's coming up. But when we see him in all of his glory, oh, those drag hooks, Lydia, how fucking badass are those?
Those are amazing. Those are an amazing tool, and I don't think they've actually been used properly in any slasher film. So, machetes are so common in so many slasher films. Baseball bats get used lots. Sickles get used from time to time, but I've not seen anything quite like this used.
There is a sequence coming up which really lets you know where the walkouts are happening, and we need to have a long lead up because we're going to be reintroduced to Aurora and Brody. Brody is the cool girl. She's like smokes weed and cusses and ribs and all that kind of stuff, and she has a thing for Aurora, and they go. It's the classic let's go skinny dipping, although they don't get naked. There's no nudity in this, which interesting choice for something that's such a classic slasher, but not unwelcome because it is, like many things, just like not necessary at all for this story. And also, we're looking at the scene from so far away. But much like when I'm up at my cottage, you could just hear this entire conversation going on across the lake. And you have Johnny there watching these two women essentially dance of seduction, Lydia. Well, come on. It's not. It's
not the dance of seduction. It is Aurora being a complete super fucking bitch and trying to lord her bisexuality, lesbianism. I don't know really what it is because she's just playing cards. She just keeps playing cards and shoving Brody around mentally. And it's not seduction. This is the sort of thing that if that Brody had a spine whatsoever, which she pretends to have, she would not have anything to do with this psychotic bitch. She's a psychotic bitch, and she is. And if there's any scene that does so little if there's any scene in a horror film that does so much with so little, they have an interaction at the end of a dock, and I hate them both. I hate them both. And it's a 4-second dialogue, really, honestly. But I do like that Johnny, looking not unlike the Juggernaut in his little thing, just walks under the water. Do you remember that from the X-Men, that Juggernaut can just walk under the water?
I absolutely do. It also kind of reminded me of The Simpsons, where Skinner is after Bart. He's like some not giving up school guy.
Johnny parks his axe because he's like, well, I guess I got to go over there and kill them, so I'll just park my axe here and walk on out under the water. And I love it because it gives that, there's a lot of scenes in this where you have a little clue, a little cue. This is okay. Sit up, pay attention because something's going to go down. And 15 minutes later, you get your payoff because you got to sit and watch every, maybe to some people, excruciating or delicious moment of him leading up to the inevitable.
The fact that we switch perspectives when Johnny is completely submerged is one of the few times they dance with our knowing where Johnny is. We know he's underneath the water. We've shifted perspectives to the women talking to each other. Aurora pitches Brody's clothes into the lake, which uncool lady, and takes off on her own, gives the baffling, when you're done with her swim, come and find me, and then we'll have sex. Wild. But that's neither here nor there, because Brody is not long for this world. And again, deceptive, because Brody is pulled underneath the water. Now, the sound that would carry with that initial yelp of getting pulled underwater, a lot of people would hear that. But certainly when she comes up for air the second time to try to get away from her situation, another huge burst of sound, and then pulled back under the water, dead silence. We do not see how she is killed, whether she is impaled by something, whether she is simply drowned, whether Johnny breaks her fucking neck. We genuinely don't know. And she is just going to break the surface of the water. And then in a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds, I should say, Johnny is just going to start walking up off the shore. And that leads him to following the trail in which Aurora had taken. Every single thing I see online ever since this movie came out is people reacting to this sequence. We have arrived at the infamous yoga death scene. Take it away, Lydia.
It's not even the most brutal scene, really, honestly.
I agree.
If you ask me. This is one of the first of two walkouts that we experienced when we were watching it. And it was just an older gentleman. I think he was just like, you know what? This is too brutal for me. I'm going to go. That's nice. Yeah. Using those drag hooks to such good effect, and his brutal strength, where, and I'll call out Sushi Typhoon again. We get almost Sushi Typhoon or Ricky O levels of strength and absurdity with this death scene, but it is played off so realistically. There's very little CG, I think, in this film. I don't know if there is any, but if there is, there's very minimal. I know that there would be some doctoring of the audio here and there, because no forest in Northern Ontario that you can get to by car is this quiet. They make it quiet. They did a great job of making it quiet, but this particular scene, she's basically turned inside out from her spine, where he reaches through her to grab her head and pull it through her chest to her back.
This is like a Mortal Kombat fatality, where you just can't believe it keeps going. When she turns to run and she gets to that cliff, the sort of womp womp look on her face could not prepare her for having a hand thrust. She is very slight. This guy's hand and hook almost is the entire circumference of her torso. She has enough presence of mind, how, to turn around and kind of look at him. And then there's that hook in the head. And at that point, I'd be like, okay, Johnny, you got her. Like, yeah, you got her, dude. I'm sure she would have died from the hand through the torso, but certainly the hook in the brain, that's definitely going to do it. And when I sat there in the theater, they got my ultimate approval when I thought to myself, all right, pretty gross. Pretty gross.
Yeah, very, very gory. And he's not just like pulling it through in a cartoon fashion. He's tugging it,
struggling
it,
on the way. It's what I thought was like actually like, pretty gross, was the breaking of her neck. Like when you see that bone protrude, I was like, oh, that's pretty gross. And then he just sort of stands there, pulls his weapons off of the body, and then just boot fucks very unceremoniously her body into like off this hill, and then you just sort of like see rocks like hit the water down at the bottom. Very cool sequence. Very worthy of people saying this was very gory, because I'll be honest with you, even if every other death was the way it was, and the goriest thing we would have seen was Aaron's death, I would have said, you guys are babies, honestly. Like, you guys are just people who say this is like super gory and are walking out are just children, and they just haven't really watched a gory movie, and that's fine. You don't have to. They're not for everybody. I'm not saying you're like, well, maybe I am because I called you a baby, but like, it's not in a shitty way. It's just I have an opinion of people who can't handle this sort of things, and it's that they're babies. So when we move on from this sequence, we are now, Johnny is, he's got a rhythm going. He has taken out 3 of these people, and there's only 4 left.
– This is where he retrieves his axe to go and get at them. But before he does retrieve his axe, which is sort of the bookends of this particular scene, and there's a shorter time between it, but there is sort of a bookend in the noticing traps in the forest and Chuck getting caught in a trap in the forest. That sort of bookends that death in a way. These deaths are bookended by the hatchet being parked into a log and then retrieved from the log. But right before he goes to do that, he pauses after killing Aurora and kicking her down the sandy dune embankment to the reservoir. And it's just this most gorgeous escarpment. It is like, when you wake up in the morning at the cottage and you go outside and you have your coffee and you look out and you're just like, yes. I don't know if Johnny is experiencing that same feeling. It could be something similar. It could also be like, okay, this is a good vantage point. Is there anyone coming? Kind of thing. But I think part of him is kind of like, yes, this is so beautiful.
It really does give that sense of, it's good to be above ground. It's that moment where you're taking in nature and you just say to yourself, you know what? It's fucking nice out here. I like it. The trees, the mist, the sunset, everything is perfect. Really just perfect.
And if anyone out there is thinking, you know what I could go for right now? A big long walk through some bracken fern and white pine, then boy, have we got some of that for you.
Johnny is going to make his way to the cabin. We are getting into the sequence where characters are yelling and arguing because people are missing. You can explain away Aaron's absence. He's probably out with those gas station girls. And Aurora and Brody are probably out there fucking. They're panicking because Chris and Colt are concerned Troy, the douche who stole the pendant in the first place, and Evan. And we have the classic, oh, you want to drive? You want your keys? Go get them. And right then and there, freeze. Stop. Let us now Rolodex every other slasher that we have ever seen. And look at how expertly this has conveyed the story of the slasher to us. Let's review. Characters going on a weekend vacation. They stop at a gas station for supplies. You have tension in the group because people dated other people. Colt knows Chris, who has been going through some shit. He's a little shady. He's got some family trauma. Troy is the clean-cut guy that just wants to have a good time and doesn't want to bring this guy there. Colt, who probably had been conveying concern to Chris, and Chris also, because she's in the know, is worried that they have noticed that One of our friends has vanished. You told us this creepy story. Now, two of our friends we also can't find, but we have no evidence. There's no body, so there's no crimes. Now we have characters that want to maintain our status quo and continue the weekend as planned, while characters who are likely going to survive to the end of the film, we don't know, but we've seen enough slashers to assume that we already know who are bodies and who are people that are going to face off against the final villain, which in this case would be Johnny. We see the classic, why don't they just get in their car and drive away? We'll take care of those keys for you in the meantime. And then we need to separate these characters because we need the last piece of this slasher puzzle. We need Ahab. We need our Ahab to give them more information about the killer to figure out what is going on. We are going to go to the ranger station, which will isolate these characters, and then we are going to go off. We don't need to see these sequences to know that they've happened. We just need to know that we're watching a slasher movie and these things happen in slasher movies. Maybe not exactly one-to-one correspondent in every single film, but we understand how the story structure works. And so we don't need any of that information. And so what we're left with is Johnny looking at the people arguing, Chris and Colt taking off on a four-wheeler because they've lost their keys, because they can't find them. And Johnny mesmerized by the keychain of a little toy car.
Little kind of toys that he would have been playing with when he was scared so badly by someone wearing the mask that he is about to remove. At the absolute top dead center of this film, we get a reveal. The reveal that's not a reveal. The reveal that is so regular, plain, down to earth, with no mysticism, no magic, not even a care in the world. We get our horrifically deformed zombie slasher killer, full frontal, full light, no mask. He takes his mask off himself. We're not going to get a big take off your mask scene in this film. No, he takes it off, no problem, because he wants to study this and maybe take a little break without it. And we get a full frontal, unflinching look at the cloudy eyes,
beautiful.
the bloodied face. Yeah, like it's very minimal but very believable. Like so much in this film.
I think that this reveal of Johnny's face is so well done. I like him playing with the car, and I want to make sure that I give Cassandra credit for this. We were watching the film yesterday, and they had said, this is my favorite scene in the whole movie. And I said, why? Not that I hated it, but I was just curious. And they say, because this is the first time that we're really looking at Johnny. That's not a killer. That's not the zombie. That is just how he was. He came back. In that moment, he was that little boy that none of this terrible things had ever happened to him yet. And I really sat with that information. I was like, that's fucking... Talk about, like I said, somebody who you will never find has more sympathy for these killers than them. That was a beautiful observation. And just on top of the makeup is so well done. I love that cloudy, almost bluish, very vague bluish tint to the eyes. The teeth are really great. And this is awesome. And I love how he kind of... You see the thing he's become take over as he sort of like hears them, something triggers in what they say, and he crushes the keychain in his hand, just crushing the car and the little toy car that he was so mesmerized with. And then he's back to, I love so many sequences in this film, but this sequence is fucking great. I love the death of Troy and Evan.
The death of Troy and Evan is fine, and I really enjoy the one take nature of it. I have to watch it again to make sure it's one take. It feels like one take, where he's done this before too, where he's walking around a house in one door and then going to eventually come out the other, leaving someone dead in his wake. But it's like the timing is impeccable. He's like, well, those people are going to walk that way, and they don't know I'm here. So if I walk this way opposite them, then I'll come out the other side and then surprise them in the most not surprising way if you're following me, because I know what's going on, and it's reminiscent of this film Peg that's not very popular, that it's all done in what seems one seamless take where you're following this person from behind. So following Johnny yet again, like we do, that's what we do for the most part in this film. But knowing that shit is gonna go down in a noisy way is a neat change. He jams. What is it that he uses to, like a shovel?
It's a broken off bit of wood. It's just like a branch, like a thick branch.
Like a thick branch. He jams it in between the seat and horn of the car, and then just walks around the building knowing that everyone's going to come out to tend to this honking horn that's extremely ear-shatteringly loud, especially since you've been sort of lulled into the quiet of this film all of this time. And he walks around the cabin. He gets spotted by Evan, and he goes and he comes back around to somebody taking the stick out of the honking horn, yelling, "It's not funny," because that's what you yell at your friends in a horror movie. And this also defies the rest of the film in that he's dealing with two people and one of them does have a gun.
I was so enamored by this sequence just because, again, it goes to I'm sorry, you're trying to tell me that this kid was slow in life? He's luring people in. He made a split-second decision to do this. This was not staring at the car, staring at the house, staring at the car, staring at the house. He walked up there and in one motion, not even looking at the branch that he picked up the branch, jammed it in there, did not stop walking, walked around. He knew exactly how to get that horn to honk extended on its own. He knew exactly the timing to walk around the house, how long it would take, and he knew exactly how to separate these two men from each other to give himself an advantage. Although, does he need an advantage? It doesn't really seem like he does. He's a fucking unstoppable force of nature. But he does. And it's really well done. And Troy manages to react fast enough to actually, oh my God, are we actually going to see somebody fight back? And kind of, because Troy is going to get his thigh cut and then Evan is going to hit him with that buckshot. Now, he doesn't double tap Johnny, which I don't even know if that would really do much anyways, but it's the
But they don't know that, and you'd like to think that they want to stop this guy.
Yeah. And you get this sequence in which Evan now is trying to make a makeshift tourniquet for Troy so they can get out of here. Bet you wish you didn't chuck those keys. Hey there, buddy. But their idea is like, okay, we could probably get to the main road from here. I'm like, man, that is a fucking long walk on that kind of injury. But they're not going to get very far because Johnny is finally going to stop teasing us. He's going to use that axe. He's a chucker. Lids. He's going to throw that axe. He loves to throw that axe from here on out.
Yep. And, it's, again, without any real planning or thought. And on one hand, it's just like, is he supernaturally lucky where he just walks this way, grabs a stick, jams it in the thing, walks around the building, kills one dude, maims one dude, takes a shot, doesn't put him down very long, just gets up and carries on like nothing happened, grabs the axe and chucks it without real thought? Or has he done this every 10 years for 50 years? Is that why he's so... And people just do the same things all the time because that's what people do?
They must, right? A lot of the reactions I'm sure he's the most used to is people not understanding what they're dealing with. And this whole time, do you know what this kept reminding me of? is a fucking video game. Does this not remind you of the Friday the 13th game? Or I don't know if you, or perhaps you've ever observed people playing Dead by Daylight, or things like that in which you can be the slasher. And it looked so much like there were so many sequences that looked like makeshift story modes that you would have in a game. And then a lot of these sequences looked like someone controlling Johnny like a video game character that's played this map 100 times and so knows precisely where all the items on the map are and how to take out the survivors and that type of thing. Hearing the dialogue of Troy, come on, Evan, get up. We don't get to see what we know, like what we assume has happened to Evan. Evan got one shot. He's just like sitting there all fucking sad and pathetic. And Johnny unceremoniously slams a humongous rock down on Troy's head. What I think might be the most digital shot. It's not disbelievable. It's not glaringly obvious, but I would at the very least assume that if you didn't go full CGI, you would have had to have digitally removed, you would have overlaid two shots. One shot of the actor Troy, like, no, please don't, help. And then a different shot of fucking the most blood you've ever seen as his head is turned into fucking chili.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd have to rewatch that scene to see if there's any room for him to sit up slightly, and then they can just like stitch the two scenes together so it looks like the rest of his body doesn't move. It really, really very gory from a distance though, because this is another camera trick and there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of different shots in this, but we've gone overhead for this. And from the time he throws that axe and we hear the, come on, we've got to be okay, get up kind of thing, the camera goes overhead on a crane and follows top down. And there's very few video games that do this, and I love it when they do. I love it when movies do this. And this was just such a fantastically shot small scene. And there's no grand murder in this. There's no huge jets of blood. It's no different than putting an animal out of its misery on the side of the road. Like, and it is using those same tools as well, a giant rock, like very non-gratuitous, yet extremely cold, heartless, and gory, and just different from top down because you kind of have that over-the-shoulder feel yet again. And I really like this. It takes out two people really quickly. We're down to our final two, just like that.
Colt and Chris return to the scene within minutes, seconds really, of both Troy and Evan dying. They can't find them, which I think is hilarious. It's like, just turn your head slightly to the right, guys, and you'll see the two bodies of your friends just laying there. They come back shouting out more information. In a way, there's almost I wonder if you could make a whole other movie from the traditional perspective and see the ranger station scene that we don't get to see, but these characters experience. Aaron is dead. Why do we know this? Because we saw Johnny pitch the body there. We got the rare opportunity to see an arrangement of a body. Johnny left it there as a message to the ranger at the station. Why? We'll learn very shortly. And then they are going to head back to the ranger station once they realize that they're pretty much on their own, because the ranger has told them, like, you guys got to get back. We got to get back to the ranger station and talk to the ranger and blah, blah, blah. Johnny hears that and is now making his march to the ranger station, which will take him to nighttime.
Yeah, if you've seen the trailer where you see Johnny, that we now know his name, Johnny, walking through the forest and it changes night to day. And it's like he's walking through different forest areas, but with that exact same pace. this is yet another one of those scenes, but I'll never get tired of watching that. I mean, I could stitch them together on a loop and watch it for 10 hours for some reason. Because, like, it's just, I don't know. Have you ever been, in, like, on, not you in particular, Wes, but anybody, on a walk through the forest when you're tired and you're marching and there's someone in front of you and that's all you see is just the back of this dude's body walking through the forest? That is the point of view of someone on a march walking tiredly through boreal forests. So it feels, again, very homey and something you're used to, and something like that you need to endure, and you need to endure it if you've done it. And I really enjoy this scene. Night or day, it doesn't matter. I would watch Johnny walk through the forest. We know where he's going, which is neat. We just know it'll take him a little longer to get there because he doesn't have a four-wheeler.
We get a bit of information as the ranger lets us know the rest of the lore, or at least the lore as he knows it, which is there's only one way to beat this guy. He needs to go back to his, like a vampire needs his earth. You need to bring Johnny back to the firehouse in which he died. That is how his father dealt with Johnny, and that is how he dealt with Johnny 10 years ago. This is a generational type thing. This has all happened before and it'll all happen again, and this ranger knows how to take this guy out. You would think he would know to shoot Johnny more times, maybe, if he's taken him out before, because, or instead of telling people to run, maybe help him. He doesn't do that. Johnny sits there basically listening to their plan on his back when he got, shot.
Not the first time that he sat there and listened to someone's plan.
And that extra shot towards the head, I love that Johnny just grabs the gun, it goes off. Then he struggles with the ranger, who's our hero, Lydia. But much like the park ranger in the classic slasher Prey, he's just going to fucking lose. He is just going to fucking lose. And this, from the moment this character's back is broken to the moment that we're done with this character is almost 7 minutes long.
Ooh, that feels like a long time. It doesn't feel quite as long when you're watching it because you're with him during this. Yeah. And yeah, it is right before it too. They do a good balance of almost comedy and real strife, because that gun scene where they're talking, they're saying their plan, Johnny's on the ground, he's like, okay, chain him up, and the guy's like, no, Evan's like, no, I don't want to. I don't know why he's too afraid to do it or something like that. And it's Colt rather, right? It's not Evan.
Yeah, Evan's already dead. Colt is the dude that's with Chris.
Colt. It says, here, chain him up, and Colt's like, no, I can't. I guess he's too afraid to chain him up, and I would be kind of afraid too. So when the ranger's like, okay, I'm going to pass this gun to you at the count of 3, 1, 2, and it's what's going to happen on 3. Johnny's going to grab the gun because he's a fucking unstoppable killer. And it's funny to me. So within a minute after that, you have a staring, immobile ranger who has gone toe to toe with Johnny twice now, as a child and as a young man who lost his father to this guy. He's got such a backstory. You want to see him be a hero, but no, he's completely neutered. And this is where we get our second walkout. And I could see why, because this might not be the most gory. It's probably got the most blood, really, if you're counting by ounce. But it's an endurance test, and you have to make that decision as a rational human being. Do I want to sit here and you have a lot of time to make this decision. Do I want to sit here and watch this man be horrifically tortured? It's not even, you don't even hear screams because he's completely paralyzed. But you know he's alive and enduring all this. Do you want to sit there with him through this?
I have, embarrassingly, it took me way too long to realize he was paralyzed. Like, up to the point in which they were basically cutting his arm off, I said, oh, he's paralyzed. Because I watched the film and I watched the back-breaking sequence, and I thought, oh, he just killed him. That was kind of unceremonious. And I could see him breathing, and I could see his eyes moving. And I said, oh, wait, he's alive. Oh, he's going to get up. He's going to, like, get the drop on Johnny, and he's going to escape, and then, you know, we'll get to the rest of the movie. No. We are going to be treated to the log splitter sequence. Let me ask you this, Lydia. What is more brutal to you personally? Yoga scene or log splitter scene?
Log splitter scene, hands down. And I can see why we had walkouts during both. And it's weird that the second person sat through all the other kind of bombastic kills and instant deaths. But yeah, didn't want to watch this. But I was witness to another walkout scene during Goodnight Mommy with the teeth scene. And it was in the middle of the teeth scene. It wasn't just as soon as they showed teeth. It wasn't somebody like, oh, can't handle teeth horror, gotta go. They didn't want to endure the rest of that.
Very interesting.
So yeah, it's that endurance test of, Johnny starts, and it is also the loudest scene in the film. It's almost as loud as the horn honkings. He turns on the generator that powers the pneumatic log splitter. And if you've used a log splitter of any sort, you know what it does. It's a big metal V that is sharpened like an axe, and it either quickly or slowly slams through a log or slowly, gently pries a log in half. And it's great for splitting hardwood and hardwoods like ironwood, some older maples like an old dense maple. Really good for splitting stuff, especially in a place where you're going to be using like firewood or giving firewood to campers and stuff like that. You can just set the log splitter up and just keep feeding it logs and it'll split all your wood for you. It's wonderful for green wood too. And it works a treat on people's arms. And so that's what he does. He props up our ranger, who has no name. Even the name tag on his shirt says Ranger.
I didn't notice that.
It does. I was watching because I was like, what is his name? Is it also Johnny? That would be fun. No, it's Ranger. His name is Ranger. And he puts his arm on the log splitter, and we get to watch it slowly split his arm off, and the blood begin to pool with no reaction. No sound save the ear-splitting, pardon the pun, noise of the generator powering the log splitter. It's gross, and it's terrifying, and you can picture you being in this position because whether you know how you're going to react or not, or what decision you're going to make to get yourself out of this jam or whatever, it doesn't matter. You would be paralyzed. Anyone could be in this exact position.
Johnny is so mad at this ranger for defeating him in the first place, for putting him to rest by giving him the necklace and bringing him back to the firehouse, that he really, more than anybody, all the other kills seem like just business. This kill, he becomes like the Marquis de Sade. Like he's like, what do you think of this, Ranger? Because he does a practice run where he's like, look at this log. He's fucking with him psychologically. He's like, this log, I'm going to do to you. And then I'm going to let you understand that I'm going to feed you to this machine on the slowest setting possible. And then I'm just going to take your arm off. Why? Because it's fucking humiliating. Because you thought you were going to defeat me, Johnny, and you are not going to defeat me. And I'm going to take your arm, and then when I feel like you've had enough, then I'm going to, as seemingly slow as can be, take your head. I agree that this is just so much worse than the yoga scene. And I am shocked that people keep reacting to the yoga scene, which is just a Mortal Kombat kill. It is so over the top that it evokes no emotion other than like, oh my God, can you believe this? Or my subtle like, pretty gross. I'll give you that movie. This was sad. In the same way that when we were watching, was it The Babysitter? Yeah, we were watching The Babysitter, the Christmas movie. And we were seeing that kid or that guy slowly hang from the tree. I was like, this is sad. It's just sad to watch this character die this way, particularly since he was a character that had been successful before. So we've been told by him in story. Doesn't work out that way. And Johnny knows that in a scene, again, that we didn't see, but we could piece together, Troy, at some point, the person who pilfered the necklace, gave it to Chris, who now has it around her neck. And Johnny wants it. He tried to like throw that axe at her again to try to kill her, but she got away. And now he pursues them further. Colt and her have a plan. It's the plan. They got a bear trap. They got some gasoline lids. Do not worry. And they're going to like, don't you worry. Don't worry about anything. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And then Colt is going to jump out of the fucking woods and he's going to taunt Johnny to like lure him. He's like, I'm going to distract him. So don't you worry. Don't you fret. Me, Colt, here. I will never let anything happen to you. I'm going to protect you. 90 times. I counted 90 times that boy is hit with an axe.
90 times. The very first one is my favorite out of all of them, I'd have to say, because it is just so sudden, because it's like, go, run, I got it, punk, done. Right before that, we do get another little giggle. We get he's looking right at us. And you think he can't hear you? Okay, I'm going to go this way. Where are you going? I'm going around. I'm going to distract him. Like, we can all hear it. Johnny can hear it. He is staring right at you. We can see you. We can see him seeing you. So it's funny. But then, 90 times. It reminds me of the sleeping bag scene, the infamous Jason Voorhees taking his frustrations out on the sleeping bag scene, because that goes on quite a while. Pardon me. There's other slashers and horror movies where people are seemingly getting their frustrations out on the dead body in a very bloody or loud moment of overkill. And this is one of those. I don't know if Johnny's really necessarily frustrated as it is, you were standing right in front of me making a plan and saying you were going to distract me. This is what you get.
It's that fevered pitch of, I want my fucking pendant. I want my mother's necklace. Mm-hmm. And all of you assholes have stolen from me, taken my stuff, run, caused me all this trouble, talk to me like I'm the idiot. That is like the reoccurring theme that I find, where it makes me think this character is not slow. This character is tired of people saying that he's slow, where he's like, you think you are smarter than me. You think I'm some brain dead zombie wandering around in the woods, and you are going to not even give me the respect. You're going to openly discuss your stupid idiot plan for dumb fucks as if I'm not standing right here, and you're going to be like, it's not going to work. And I'm going to prove it to you by splitting your mush and hitting you 89 other times while Chris has a full on fucking meltdown. Now, technically speaking, we might have gotten over 100 times with the axe, because when Chris is having her meltdown, she removes the necklace finally. Why she didn't do that in the first place, maybe not to lose it. She puts it, the plan is fucked. She is standing there like a dipshit holding the gasoline can and the bear trap, and she just kind of slowly puts it down, takes off the necklace, and puts it down. While she's freaking out and running in the woods, you hear some more squelching axe sounds, which brings it up to about 100. But I don't know if she is just having a PTSD. I don't know if this is just her freaking out because she literally watched who you would presume narratively the closest person to her get hacked to pieces, like literally into a pile of flannel and diarrhea on the forest floor. If she's just imagining it in her mind or not, but 90 confirmed before that sequence, maybe 100 times in total. Not exactly sure. Listeners, if you're interested, watch the scene, count it. That's what I did. 1, 2, 3. And she runs. And one of the complaints going into this film that I have heard is people bitching about the ending.
Oh, yeah, and I'm one of them, because the movie could have ended right here and it would have been perfect. It would have been so pitch perfect. It would have soothed my little horror heart for it to end right here. She's put the chain on the gas can. She's backed away, gotten far enough from the maniac that is butchering her friend to itty bitty pieces. I like your idea of flannel and diarrhea. That's exactly what he's being reduced to. And she gets to run. She's not a final girl because she did anything spectacular. She's not a final girl because she's so smart. She's not a final girl because she had a rebirth sequence, unless she did fall in the outdoor toilet and crawl out again.
We
and we
didn't
didn't get to
one.
see it. But other than that, yeah, like she didn't have the final girl moments other than seeing everyone around her die and her most important friend butchered brutally. Other than that, she gets to leave because she's returned the necklace. That would have been perfect, absolutely perfect. But I think not only because we got a little bit of star power coming, we also have not reached 88 minutes quite yet.
The first time in the film that we shift perspectives totally begins now. Now the camera is behind Chris, and for the first time ever, we don't know where Johnny is. And that is why this sequence works for me so well. Now, upon second viewing, I agree that the effect is diminished, but I'm going to take you back to the first time where I felt tension. I felt nervousness. I felt anxiety, because for this entire film, I knew where the killer was. I knew exactly the moment every character was going to die, pretty much how they were going to die, and there was no tension. The tension was not in the movie. The movie was a horror movie that was relaxing you. That was the ambiance. You always knew where he was. Now you don't, and you get embarrassingly, I did not recognize the woman at first. I knew she was somebody. I was when I came in and I was like, okay, they've gotten an older actor to come in for this one sequence to do a very long monologue about a bear, while she's rescuing Chris. And I kept thinking, I was like, who is this? Who is this? Who is this? That is Lauren Taylor. And I felt so stupid after I looked it up, and I was like, it's Vicky. It's Vicky from Friday the 13th Part 2. One of my unapologetic, massive crushes when I was really young. And I always loved Vicky. She had a great sequence in Friday the 13th Part 2. She had one of the longest of all the characters that get killed in that movie. She has a long sequence of which she's fighting back in that. She's also in Girls Night Out, a really underrated, weird slasher, but very underrated slasher. This was her first role in 20 years. And they got her to come back with a phone call. She was contacted and said, do you want to come back and do a horror movie? And she said yes. Now, it's not like she hadn't acted at all. She had been doing theater. She only did a few movies in the 1980s, and then she would go on to become a kindergarten teacher, and then she would again do sort of like local theater type stuff, and do a few commercials, but no films, and certainly not horror. And it was just so fascinating that of everyone they could choose, they brought her back for this. This sequence is designed to drive you crazy as Chris is getting driven away, because the woman is taking her time. She's not starting. Every 5 seconds I thought, and Johnny's going to come and pull this woman out and kill her. Every 5 seconds, this guy's going to come out and like jump into the woods. And I'm like, drive the fucking car, you psycho. Drive the fucking car. Like, don't make a tourniquet. Drive the fucking car. And even though I understand people's frustration with this ending, because it can seem like a bit of a non-ending, it could seem like all of the energy and tension were poured out of the film, and you have this languid 10-minute monologue of blue balls, essentially. But I think it's so fucking effective for the simple fact that I don't know where Johnny is for the first time in the film. And I rode that tension. Doesn't work so well on the second watch. However, in that first watch, I thought it was a stroke of genius.
Mm-hmm. When Chris and I were watching it the second time, he had the same sort of feeling where, of course, it just doesn't quite work on a second viewing. You're still kind of playing with yourself with like, oh, he could come out of the forest at any time. We don't get enough of the forest, though. And I think that it would have been escalated if they needed to keep this scene in there, to have more scenes of the forest or wildlife coming out of the forest, so that you could see things, coming out of the woods, or more shots of them peering into the woods, more stops or something to make it more tense, perhaps, because it really does deflate the tension while it's building it, because you don't see enough of the forest. You get a lot of this story, and granted, the story does tie in the whole henhouse syndrome of something just starts killing and it just keeps killing and it doesn't know why, and it sounds like Johnny. But the first time I was watching it, I was even playing with the idea that, well, this has got to be Johnny's sister, and she's just going to drive him right to the fire thing, and that's where Johnny's going to be waiting, and revenge will finally come completely told, because he's got his necklace back, but he just keeps killing. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't go like that, of course. But you want to see him, and it does end on this like long shot peering into the forest, just waiting for something to come out.
If I had a message to any filmmakers, if you are looking to, I don't know if how many more ideas, how many different ways you can tell this story with a slasher. Camps, young people, a vengeful ghoul risen from the grave, area cursed by tragedy and cruelty all those decades ago, doomed to rise again and again. I don't know if there is another way to do this story, but to see something so creative, and all they did was turn the camera perspective, and they did it in a way which required a lot of trust in the audience and had a lot of payoffs, because it was going to give you the things that you as a slasher fan wanted. You were going to have an iconic killer, Johnny, added to the pantheon of these masked killers. It's going to be its own thing while reminding you of the past. It's going to owe a lot to the slashers that came before it by not trying to duplicate them, but existing in the world in its unique way. If there's another unique way to do it, it's your job as writers and filmmakers to find it. Because this wink, wink, looking at the camera, isn't this so silly? It's a camp slasher. I'm fucking sick of it. I'm sick and fucking tired of it. It is lazy, it is cliche, and it fucking sucks. And I am sick and tired of you trying to explain the fucking background of these characters. They're campfire stories. Keep it simple. Keep it concise. Be more like In a Violent Nature. And that's why I'm so torn. Would I love to see more of Johnny? Absolutely. But do I also at the same time feel like it shouldn't ever be touched? This should never get a sequel. I also feel that way, almost in equal measure. What about you?
I thought about the sequel quite seriously upon the first time I saw it. And what I wanted was something that you had pointed out already, who is you want this film from the other perspective. You want this filmed in a traditional slasher film way. We don't want to know where the keys go. we want the keys to be thrown in the forest and never see them again. We don't want to focus on the toy car on them either. We don't want to know where the bodies were posed or how the bodies were posed or how long it took them to walk there. We just want to go to the ranger station and see the body posed. We don't want to, deal with, how did he get there? How did the killer get there? He walked, obviously. What was the killer doing when they were taking the post out of the honking car? Was he standing in the corners giggling at them? No, he was walking around the house, dummy. Maybe we want to see everything from the other point of view, just for fun. That would be a great sequel and the only real sequel. But then I thought last night after watching it that I would like to have a sequel. I would love to have a sequel to this film. It is a short film. You could even release it on YouTube in vertical format because who gives a shit anymore? And it would just be a picture of the dilapidated fire tower with a post sticking out of the ground and a locket hanging off of it and a note that says, "Do not touch this locket. It belongs to Johnny. He's a homicidal maniac that rises every 10 years if someone touches this locket. So just do not touch the locket. In fact, it's been soldered to this post, so you can't touch it. So here is a replica locket for you to take if you feel the need, but don't touch this one or else people are going to die."
You had made an interesting point that he's still out there untethered. And perhaps the true purpose of that bear story is to let us know that now he is untethered and in a position that perhaps he's never been in. There's no one that took him down. There's no final girl that had her final hurrah and she took out the bad guy. So maybe it's time, maybe in a sequel, you could say, what does that look like? Or let's look at horror sequels and how we turn the camera on those now. Is that possible? I don't know. These people are smarter than me, Lydia. I am just the goober that sat back and was blown away by a film I didn't know I wanted and has now become one of my favorite and, in my opinion, best slashers ever made.
That's some lofty words. Another idea for a sequel might be that the woman is Ranger's sister and then gets back and realizes what happened to her brother who had survived that bear attack. And maybe it wasn't even a bear that ever attacked him. Maybe it was Johnny in the first place.
The whole time I fucking thought maybe that could be it too. And I would have no problem as bringing in Lauren Taylor to be like some kind of like, I'm going to get my brother's or my son or whoever. We don't know. She could be anyone, an aunt, a fucking family friend, anybody. Yeah. But there's still meat on this bone. But again, I'm just so ambivalent about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy to leave it because it is perfect. I would have liked it to stop with just the chain on the gas can and leave it to our imagination. For those who like completion, we do get a shot of the gas can with no chain on it, knowing that he is, yes, completely untethered. And then we end with a little Canadian ditty, Wes, a little song to soothe the soul.
The Black Fly song of Ontario. This was, again, humiliatingly, I was like, whoa, wait, is this Canadian? Because there's nothing. I had no fucking idea. Again, this is part of like going into a film with very little research, and I just want to experience the movie. And then when that song hit there, this little bit of Americana, this folk song that was written in 1949, is about, again, Ontario, black flies. Is something about these little buggers and Johnny kind of looks like a fly, like with that mask. So like, again, like these little motherfuckers, and black fly season, holy shit, is it bad? And we're in Ontario and we're singing about it, and this little folk song is so fucking perfect. And it was that dawning realization. And I remember standing in the theater watching the credits, like, because I was about to leave, and I was just like standing there watching the credits, because I was like, where was this filmed? Where was this filmed? And you get the credits and it lets you know it was filmed in Canada. And I was like, motherfuck. I had no idea that this was all filmed. And then I got really excited, and it elevated everything, because, oh man, Ontario, that's where we're from, Lydia.
Yeah, we've walked through forests just like this. And indeed, our friend Amy Jane Vosper has made a little bit of a proto slasher, and is planning more of it that is filmed in maybe very close by to where this was filmed in part in Peterborough. So I thought it was just very cool. And having that weird little folk song that not many people know, unless you're from Ontario or dig weird folk songs, maybe. Other than that, it was like yet another thing that made me feel very homey, although it could be any forest. You could probably watch this anywhere in the world and still have those same species of things and same sort of bird song in the background, because if there's a score, that's the score. It's bird song and people walking through knee-high bracken fern.
So what do we got next for them?
Next, we're going to stay with a little bit of this slasher theme. We're going to stay with a little bit of this moonlight masked man. We're going to do Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, a film that I'm shocked we haven't done either, and I love it, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the best slasher of all time, maybe.
It certainly is up there with the best meta slasher of all time. Done correctly, Leslie Vernon is an iconic slasher. Talk about like a slasher that horror fans absolutely love, that never got a sequel, bafflingly, but I'm excited and equally shocked that we had never done it before. But I think that there were so many elements of In a Violent Nature that were reminding me so much of Behind the Mask that I couldn't help but think about that film. And then it was pointed out to me rightfully that we'd never covered it on the show. So I'm glad that we're going to finally be able to right that wrong.
And I'm excited too, because it is really fantastic. And if there is a film out there that may spur filmmakers into making a sequel to Leslie Vernon, I want to see a Behind the Mask 2. Maybe In a Violent Nature is it.
I'm Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to the footsteps of dead air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peever and hosted by Lydia Peever and me, Wes Knipe. We'll see you next time.